I believe everyone who has joined has been moved over as a panelist.
Okay, well, let's get going then. Welcome everyone. Happy Monday after a lovely weekend. Still a lovely day. We'll go forward with roll call.
All right, Town of Ashland, Miss Amos.
Here.
Charles City County, Miss Adams.
Here.
Chesterfield County, Chair Smith.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Vadunez.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Yor.
Here.
New Kent County, Miss Inman.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. Shardine. City of Richmond, Miss Clark. GRTC, Mr. Adarqua. Miss Robinson.
Here.
CVTA, Mr. Parsons.
Here. I see Miss Clark is joining also.
Okay, thank you. Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
VDOT, Mr. Totten. Mr. Riblet. Miss McAdory. And I see that we have Miss Rhodes. Miss Rhodes, shall I mark you as the representative for VDOT today? I'll move on to RMTA, Miss Dean. And Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is consideration of amendments to the agenda. And I did have something myself. I would suggest that we reorder items 7 and 8 and do 8 first, 7 second. 8 is the deallocation policy, which is going to be referenced in the framework document. So I might want to do it in that way.
So move, Madam Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we've reordered that. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? Okay. Moving on to item 4, approval of our last meeting, September 9th, the meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, are there any corrections? If they're good to go, is there a motion to approve the September 9th meeting minutes?
I'll motion to approve the September 9th minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Second, anyone? Come on
Second
now.
from Hanover.
Thanks, Joe. All right, we can handle this with a voice vote. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I will abstain. I missed that meeting. This is Todd.
Thanks. Okay, Todd's abstaining. All right, moving on to number 5, public comment period. Have we gotten any comments, or is there anyone joining us that would like to comment?
We haven't received any requests.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to item number 6, CVTA TAC Chair's report. That's me. I don't have anything to report. So item number 7, which is the regional funding deallocation policy. I'll turn this over to Chet.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to try and share the text. Okay, can everybody see that? This is also linked in the agenda packet, but what we've included is our latest working version of a markup for the deallocation policy. This, I believe it was referred at the last TAC meeting back to the work group that has been meeting to discuss the language, and that is Chair Smith, Dorona, and Amy, and myself and legal counsel. We did discuss following the last TAC meeting, and what was included in the packet is the latest version, and this is an action item requesting a motion to recommend full authority approval of the deallocation policy, but I wanted to take a few minutes to kind of walk through what's been discussed and the changed language. So this is not for those who are catching up. This is not something that currently exists for the CVTA, but this is something that has been referenced in the framework. So I'm glad the chair decided to switch the agenda. That was a great idea. So the framework mentions that there is a potential for deallocation of funds. And what myself and Mr. Gregory wanted to do was actually address that from the framework so that in the event that there's a need, we have something to refer to for the authorities' possible action, or at least consideration. So this is a very short policy, and it would take its place among our other financial policies and procedures as guidance documents, I believe. But I think that's something that we tackle down the road in terms of where it fits. But this would provide the reference for the framework. So the first paragraph basically talks about the framework, the process by which project applicants are encouraged to leverage CVTA funds for outside funding, of all different types. The leveraged funds are allocated by CVTA for a regional project are considered allocated funds and can't be allocated to another project until they're deallocated. So they're committed through that regional process to particular projects. Following the award of CVTA regional funding to leverage additional funding for a project, if the project sponsor is not able to obtain full funding through leveraged resources, there are options. The project estimate will be adjusted for inflation and programmed forward to the anticipated funding year of the additional source. And this has happened for some projects already. The project sponsor may also request a new amount for leverage funds. If this new amount is not included in the funding scenario, the project sponsor can adjust the request or retain the original funding request and try for a second time to achieve additional project funding. That's something that we have discussed. You get two chances to achieve the leverage funding through the regional funding rounds. If the adjusted leveraging amount is approved by the CVTA, the process is reset with the new funding amount as the first leveraging attempt. So now we're down to where the blue language is in the agenda. If the project sponsor is unable to fully fund the project and the proposed change here, we had discussed in the second attempt, that is marked through, because that's focused just on the smart scale cycle. The work group decided that smart scale is not the only source of funds for projects to obtain leveraging. So the language was changed to within 4 years of having regional CVT funds allocated. It's the same time period essentially as two smart scale cycles, but it also provides options for other sources of funding, like IIJA grants or something else that might be able to provide that resource. If the project sponsor is unable to fully fund the project, et cetera, the project will be deemed eligible for deallocation. It doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be deallocated, but it is eligible. So then we outline the process for how the CVTA shall treat projects eligible for deallocation, and if the funds are deallocated, how those funds will be directed back into the regional project funding budget. Essentially, how those funds are opened back up for other projects that may be deemed regionally significant. So this paragraph is fully crossed through. So we go to the next paragraph. Deallocation will first be considered by the Technical Advisory Committee, period. The TAC will advise the Finance Committee on a recommended action, period. The Finance Committee will review and consider TAC's recommended action and provide an ultimate recommendation to the authority for consideration and action. And this was from this last discussion of the work group to really set up a step-by-step process for how it would move through our committee structure to the full authority. And I think this language reflects that. And then finally, the CVTA will notify the project sponsor and or VDOT in writing that it will consider the recommendation to deallocate CVTA funds from a project and allow the opportunity for a response to the proposed action. So the project sponsor and or VDOT responses to a potential deallocation will be considered by the Finance Committee, which shall make a recommendation to the CVTA for action. If they do not act or respond within the designated timeframe, CVTA may take action by motion or resolution to deallocate funds and place them back into balance entry for CVTA regional project funds. So deciphering the last paragraph, if it goes through TAC, through Finance Committee with a recommendation to the authority for consideration, then the authority comes back, notifies the project applicant or VDOT that it intends to consider the recommendation to deallocate, provides another opportunity for making an argument, making a case of why it should or should not be deallocated, and then the authority takes action. So lots of checks, lots of balances, but this does, I think, what we wanted to do, which is provide a reference and a policy for consideration by both the committees and the full authority when projects get to that point where deallocation should be considered. Sorry if that went on too long and too detailed, but I think that covers everything that we've discussed. And again, there's a requested action to recommend full authority approval of the regional funding deallocation policy.
Thank you, Chet. Are there any questions? Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi there. Hey, Chet. Thank you for explaining that. I'm just asking a clarifying question on the adjusted leverage portion. So this is the last sentence of the second paragraph. If the adjusted leveraging amount is approved by the CVTA, the process is reset with new funding amount as if it's the first leveraging attempt. Can that be done multiple times?
Yes.
Yes, at this point, that is considered a reasonable action. Yeah.
So the CVTA could reset all of the existing leverage projects each time and they start at the beginning again. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, I guess what I'm still trying to wrap my head around is less about what is in this policy document we're looking at, but I mean, goes back to the definition of a leverage project, because I see some gray area that if there's a regional project that has regional allocations on it and it's not fully funding the project, but you're proceeding with the project under various aspects of design and potentially even into right of way while you're leveraging the funds. So yes, it's leverage funding, but you're utilizing the leverage funds, which means you then have to have a SPA agreement in place. So what defines whether a project is leverage fund only and you don't have access to those funds to begin the project versus a project that you're leveraging the funds, but you're also using at least a portion of those leverage funds to advance the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. if you don't mind me jumping in. Um,
Please.
we've got our PE only projects, which, you know, we would proceed with design for those. In the VDOT world, you don't really proceed until you've got a plan in place to fully fund the project, unless it's just a study or something. So I guess the question might be, would the CVTA execute an agreement on a project that wasn't fully funded to allow design to go forward? Remember last round, we had projects that went after leveraging or had leveraging, went after smart scale, weren't successful. And then we came back and got permission to use a portion of the leveraging to proceed with 30% design plans. Anyway, I'm just kind of bringing that up. I think that's a good question and something that we probably do need to get clear. Amy?
Go ahead, Darwin, and I can go after Darwin.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna, I think that Todd brought up a good point. And then Barb, what you just said, like, confused me again. So one way is if you submit it under PE, it can move forward without worrying about the deallocation. And then, but like, for example, with the north-south, we just put that spot through is for leveraging. But you know, we put the spot through because we wanted to be able to move to even leverage the dollars, get the money ready to be leveraged. So I think a SPA creation, and I know one time, Chet, you had said that if a CVTA project had a SPA, then it potentially couldn't be deallocated. And I think I wanted clarity on that as well, because yeah, just for my own projects, I think I need clarity on that.
Yeah,
Amy?
I'll go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Madam Chair. So this has been a recent conversation we've been having with VDOT, sort of the request to go ahead and execute a SPA on the funding that we have been allocated for leverage. And what I have surmised from the framework agreement is that the regional funds, if they have been applied for and awarded as leverage, that they are not active until the project is fully funded. So therefore, the funding will still be there, right? But the way the framework reads is that really those funds can't be allocated yet or accessed unless it, like Barb, what we've been talking about, if it went through a cycle and it didn't get funded and the TAC and CVTA decides to go ahead and allow the sponsor to use up to a certain percentage of those dollars to do the design and engineering, then we would allow for that. But outside of that circumstance, that these funds would not be allocated until they were leveraged. If a project sponsor wanted to use the regional funds for PE or some other source, then they could have applied for those funds as PE.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is, and there's been some sort of assertion that if we go ahead and start PE and allow VDOT to start PE, that potentially the smart scale funding could potentially be moved up, right? So I'm trying to weigh all of these options and understand what we can and cannot do, or what we should and should not be doing with leverage funds.
Mhm.
And
And the way
we all,
oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
That's it. That's all. Thank you.
The way you described it is the way I understand it, is that projects that are using CVTA regional for leveraging, that leveraging dollars sit there programmed to the project, and until the project is fully funded with the other sources, those funds can't be used unless, like we did last round, we make a conscious decision to pull out some of the funds for 30% plan
Right.
development.
Yeah. To prepare them for the next round.
Mm-hmm. Todd, does that kind of answer your question, or do we need more?
It does and it doesn't. And you hit on a very valid point in your initial response to my question, and that is that, because of the requirements that VDOT has for the 6-year plan, that on the VDOT side, that unless a project has full funding, it doesn't really move forward as a project unless it's designated as PE only. As I interpret it at this on the CVTA side, we don't necessarily have that restriction, right? Our goal is to advance regional projects, and yes, leverage money as much as we can, but also not have a project sit idle until you have full funding on it. So we're talking about, and I'm not talking about your average, $10 million smart scale project that maybe you're leveraging $2 million, where we have one of those and it didn't get funded last round. So we're trying again. I'm talking about big regional multi-phase projects, which many of us on this call have one, that you can be creative and start phasing things. And I'll use short pump as an example. That's a suite of projects. So as we move forward once we get through the NEPA process, end of this year, beginning of next year, then we have guidance from FHWA and VDOT on, how we can kind of chip away at the full suite of projects. So if we're limited by, well, you can't start anything until you have full funding, then that's hampering that project, as opposed to there's another round of funding beyond the 5 million that we got to do the NEPA and the initial PE. 5 million doesn't do full PE for a 300 some million dollar project, but you can then do portions of that project while you're A, leveraging, and B, getting the full funding out of all the different sources of funding out there. So I don't know if go ahead.
Yeah, if that is something we want to do, it's going to require changes to the framework document.
Yeah.
Because the framework document also clarified after last round that if an applicant submits for PE only and for leveraging, for the same project. So if you submit for PE only and then you also submit for leveraging, you would be able to proceed with PE only if you got it funded with CVT Regional. But otherwise, it's not an automatic that you can use leveraging money for design.
And you said that's in the revised framework?
In the
That's
framework
correct.
document.
Okay.
That's in the framework that's been approved.
Revised April of 23.
Gotcha.
So, Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
might, so I think that's the point, that if you're advancing any project, you should know where you are with it, right? So if you know that you need to do design and engineering or PE, then that's what you should apply for, right? If you have a $300 million project and you haven't advanced preliminary engineering and design to a point to where it could be funded, then maybe you need to rethink the strategy, right? So I agree that the framework document would need to be reworked in order to allow that. And I believe that people have the option to apply for PE, and you also have your own local funding that you could be using to advance PE. So there are other options as it relates to advancing PE, other than just using your leverage funds from CVTA.
Dorona?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just have a quick question for Amy. So I'm trying to think. So for your request, that was the large amount, it was for construction only and no design and preliminary engineering?
No, I think.
And go ahead, Barbara.
Go ahead, Amy.
No, it was for the full project.
Mm-hmm. And so,
But what I'm saying is, it was for leverage, but, you know, it's been brought to our attention that perhaps we could go ahead and execute a SPA agreement and begin PE for our project without it being fully funded. And when I go back to the framework document, it says that for that leverage funds to be active, it has to be fully funded. So unless I were to come back to the TAC and it be, I guess, reallocated as PE, then it needs to remain sort of as a funded, you know, a programmed project, but it hasn't been activated yet, right? Because it's not fully funded. So and personally, I want to make sure I'm clear, because I don't want to do something to jeopardize our project and funding and, you know, our smart scale application and everything else.
I'm trying to, oh, shoot. So, you know,
I think it's the page before that, right?
but didn't,
I thought it was,
well, no, it's right there where it says, it's right
Oh,
there.
it's the page
Where it
after.
says fully funded on under leveraging, the
Yep.
first paragraph.
what was I going to say? So, and then there's also the issue of we've got the caps on PE only and studies, which is a parking lot item from the framework document as well. So Todd's point about we should be making progress in advancing projects is a good one, right? If we've got these projects that are important, getting them further along in design is going to be to our benefit, because we've got more solid information on how much the project's going to cost. But it would be, we would need to, like I said, for the instance, for the New Kent interchange, if they had submitted a PE only application and an application for the entire project with, you know, trying to get leveraging money, and if both of those have been funded, then we could go ahead with the SPA agreement for the PE only at this point, while we're waiting to hear about whether the leveraging is successful.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I mean, I think I have I think I have an issue with that if that's the way that it is, and if we're saying that we need to adjust that or make some changes to it as we move to our next item, because I think, yeah, because the last sentence in the first paragraph is saying, like, are not considered active projects until fully funded. But like I said, we just took North-South BRT through the SPA process, and it's clearly not fully funded, and so there's not. And I think that other people have leverage funds that have SPA agreements already from the first or second, I mean, at least from the second cycle, that doesn't correlate with what we have right here. So I think that
The second round, let me just interrupt on that real quick. The second round, we had an action considered by TAC in the full authority to take leverage funds specifically, a portion of leverage funds specifically to continue design. So it was a intentional decision.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, Barb.
Well, for instance, in Chesterfield, well, my example's not good. In Chesterfield, we applied for PE only and leveraging for the same project, but only the leveraging project got scored when we wanted both of them scored.
Okay.
So we went only with leveraging. We did not get smart scale. We came back and said, we want to use 100,000 to do 30% plans. And we made that proposal to TAC, and then it went to the full authority and they agreed. So our SPA agreement is for that little amount of money.
Well, yeah, and
Just-
I wasn't specifically in no way talking about yours.
Oh, no, I just was
literally-
giving that as an example. That's how
yeah,
those
yeah.
were done.
Yeah, and so the question becomes, so is everybody with leveraging then should go to the authority for an amount to start design? I mean,
Well, let's look at the framework. There's funds from leveraging for PE. The sponsor may request a portion of the leveraging funds in the amount necessary to develop 30% plans. Leveraging available for the second attempt will be reduced accordingly unless the applicant successfully applies for a new leveraging amount. So this doesn't really put a time frame on it, because I was acting like you needed to go through the exercise of not getting funded through Smart Scale before you make the request. So does that help clarify? Like anybody today, if you requested leveraging for this round of Smart Scale, you could request a portion of those funds for PE right now.
no, and if that's the case, I think that's awesome. Because if you think about it, but when we be careful what we ask for, so we say 30% design, and so like yours was a small amount of 100,000, but when you're looking at, even for example with North South with 100 million plus price tag, 10 million, 10% of that is 10 million.
Mhm.
So are we going to be okay with that? I mean, if we
Yeah.
are, I'm good.
I feel like we probably need to think about this a little further, because we do have these funding limits as well. And I know that's something that we did not want to get into a position in when we were developing the framework, is we didn't want to spend all of our, to take to an extreme, to spend all of our CVTA regional money developing plans and not being able to implement them. So we were trying hard to make sure that we could see a clear path forward and to actually getting these projects on the ground. We didn't want to spend all of our money just on studies or PE only. This might be something we need to discuss further. But let's hear, Amy, what do you have?
Just that word. So I think we need to be careful if we've applied for leverage funds and now we take a portion of those and use it for PE. Will the funding agency, wherever you're going, if you're going to get federal funding or even state funding, will they look at that as local match, right? Will they consider that as the match, as leverage? And
yeah, you're right. You've reduced it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's been my rub a little bit, has been, well, if we take some of our money and use it for PE, I want it in a writing that that's going to be viewed as our local match, right? As our leverage. So you can't,
yeah, you can't spend it.
amount.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my biggest questions that I've had with this, is because I really don't, we can't afford to reduce our leverage amount for the sake of getting it into PE, 6 months earlier than what we would if it was fully funded. So I go back to, I think people need to really understand where their projects are. And if it's really in design and PE, then that's where you should be, what you should be funding for, requesting your, funding. So anyway,
okay,
that's all.
Todd.
So if you're taking a portion of the money to apply towards PE, even if that's coming out of the leverage amount, you're then buying down the cost of the project by the cost of PE. So that's sort of a wash if I'm looking at that correctly.
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily a wash. If you submitted an application to FHWA that said you were going to provide 10 million and you've taken away 1 million, you really should be telling them you're providing 9 million.
But the cost of your project just went down by $1 million of what you're trying to get funded.
Not in Federal Highway's mind. I
guess it just all depends on the timing. If if you can go into it saying you're only offering 9 with your application, then that would work.
Or you're putting in 10, but you're going to use $1 million of that for your leverage. I mean, for your PE.
Dorona?
Yeah, I just had a final, because to me, like, if the project, any project that needs, PE right away in construction, it's all in the same phase. So I'm confused, Amy, when you keep saying that if the project isn't, if it needs to be in PE and design, then it needs to be in PE and design. But I'm not understanding what's the difference in your project. It's the same thing. So I think that this region we don't have a backlog of plans of projects to be done, and that irregardless, if we want our construction, we want these dollars to go to all construction. If we still got to do PE design and construction, then that's what we have to do. So I'm not really, what I mean?
If I may respond to that, Madam Chair. So
Sure.
you submitted your application. You have to submit for your PE, right? What you expect for your PE to cost, what your right-of-way costs, then what your construction costs. So there are different phases of a project that we've applied for, right? And we've put dollar amounts to each of those phases. So if we want to carve out PE, our PE, I think, was 7 million, I think, is what maybe we had, then we would, that is a phase of the project. So there are different phases of the project in VDOT's mind. And I think it's the same as with where you are with any kind of the FTA or federal highway. They still have their, progression and their project development phases.
Yeah, and that's all I was saying is that a lot of our projects still need all 3 phases. That's all I'm saying, is that a lot of we don't have any project hardly that the PE and design, at least that has been submitted in some cases, that the PE and design are already done and then straight for construction. So I think that as a region, we have that issue that we don't have those backlog. We have projects, but they still include those preliminary non-shovel ready elements that that we're talking about. And so when the project has the separate phases, those are the 3 complete phases. And if neither of those phases have been done, then the project necessarily isn't ready. So anybody who requested all 3 phases, all of us have these unready projects, and we're trying to make some more ready than others. And if we were to do that, we would easily see which projects would be funded. Without, and it goes back to, if the locality had dollars to do all the planning money into the plans in the first place, which we were saying with some of the equity issue is that we didn't have this backlog of dollars to get these projects to design and shovel ready to be this, that the CVTA, that we want the CVTA dollars to do right away. I think that that's where we have some of the issue. But I think we've kind of, I guess, how do we bring it back to the deallocation, Madam Chair?
I was just thinking about that. I feel like these points are very pertinent in 2 ways. One, the deallocation policy, but also the framework document. And our parking lot item, it's not really a parking lot item because I only brought it up at our last meeting, whether we needed to consider those maximum percentages capping PE only and study projects, because I know that, what Todd is saying, what VDOT is asking Amy to do, there's a desire to move some projects along. And that is to our benefit when it comes to bonding. I don't really know, don't understand bonding, but the little teeny bit I heard when we went through it recently was they were willing, the bonding people were willing to bond if we could spend the money in a hurry. And the only way you can spend money in a hurry on projects is to be in the construction phase. So the more projects we have ready, those are going to be better candidates for bonding scenarios. That we've moved them through PE and we've moved them through right of way and we're ready to spend big, pay invoices, big invoices on a monthly basis. I would suggest that maybe we get a few folks together to look at the framework. Chet, is it going to present a problem to think about the deallocation policy one more time? Or can we do the deallocation with just changes to the framework?
I don't believe that the deallocation is specific enough in any one area where we can't focus on the framework to make changes and move forward with the deallocation policy as it is.
Okay, maybe I should stop sharing and you can pull that back up again.
Sure.
Okay, so I think we're going to take a look at the deallocation, see if we can take action on that, knowing that we need to do a little work on the framework based on the discussion we just had.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just have one last out there plea. I would be remiss if I didn't. Is there any way we could like potentially grandfather everything else and be like 2024 forward? Just asking.
Well, duly noted, and we can, that'll be something we can think about. Does anyone see a reason why we cannot proceed with the deallocation policy as it's written?
Madam Chair, I think you can move forward. I think we can move forward with the deallocation.
Todd?
Just for clarification, Barb, so what, if I understand what you're proposing, is we can take action to recommend the deallocation policy, and that would then get included into the revised framework document, but then we set aside the framework document for further discussion in some form for kind of the bigger picture we're talking about with PE versus leverage and so forth.
Yes.
Because that was the initial question or issue I raised. It was less what's in the allocation document than how we're interpreting and how we're using the funding. So I'm good with that suggestion if I interpreted it correctly.
Yeah. I know that's what we're thinking about doing. Okay, so is there any more discussion on the deallocation policy on its own? If there isn't, is there a motion to recommend approval?
This is Amy. I'll make a motion to approve the deallocation as it has been presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sherry. Do we need roll call or can this be a voice vote?
Voice vote's fine.
Okay. All right, we'll take a voice vote to recommend approval of the deallocation policy. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're good. Now, our item 8, which is the framework document. I'm trying to get over there again. So in your agenda packet, the marked up framework document reflecting our discussion in the past few months is included. The stuff in purple, those are the changes. And I think we've just decided that we need to defer action on this item so that we can talk more about PE only, leveraging the caps. Another parking lot item that we had talked about not including with approval of the revision of the framework document has to do with how to score transit projects. So I would propose that we defer action on this, but still have some information discussion. Chet?
I think that is a reasonable path forward. I can talk about the transit scoring if that's something that you'd like to do today. Options for that.
Yeah, let's go ahead with that.
Okay, thank you. So let me share my screen. So the discussion was to look at the impacts of activity centers on how transit projects were scored. So what we've done is go back and look at the projects that were submitted in round 3 for transit funding and how they would be impacted when we look at proximity to activity centers. So we've got 3 different projects that were as part of the package for round 3. Looking at the activity centers from the current long-range transportation plan. Those are identified. I don't remember the total number. They're like 19 activity centers in the region. They're areas with significant number of residents and jobs and are delineated the geographic areas based on traffic analysis zones. So what you've got on the screen here are the big ones are the Richmond CBD, Staples Mill, and the Henrico Government Center. So the process to score for potential transit projects are to buffer those projects based on the project tier. In the LRTP scoring, the tiers are identified based on the type of facility, like where the project is located, is a major arterial, et cetera, basically the intensity of the project and the project location. So CVTA eligible transit projects are going to be the bigger projects anyway, but things like BRT or the downtown transfer center are all going to be tier 2 or 3. We're not going to usually see anything that's a tier 1, which is a smaller intensity type of projects. So the LRTP project categories for the 2 BRT projects, the north-south and the Western Pulse Extension, are both major arterials with new dedicated transit right away. The downtown transfer station is a tier 2, and that is based on that it's a new or relocated transit station or center. So slightly different, obviously, types of projects, but the focus is different. So what that means ultimately is the buffering is larger for a tier 3 than it is for a tier 1 or tier 2. And what we've got, I believe, is, and Miles, jump in if I don't have my notes. I think it's a 2-mile buffer for a tier 3 and a 1-mile buffer for a tier 2, or something similar to that.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, thanks. So that's what you got in blue on the screen for the Western BRT and the north-south. They both have a larger buffer than the downtown transfer center, but still large buffers all the way around. 2 more pages.
Probably, can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
And it probably, someone could argue that the transfer station is a little bit different than just a station. You know what I mean? If this is where all the routes are kind of, maybe there's an argument to be made that should be a 3 and not a 2.
Fair enough.
I don't know.
Okay. But yeah, remember this goes back to the LRTP. So that's currently under development now for the update. That could be something to be considered. Okay. So essentially what the process would be for the activity center-based scoring is to calculate the intersection of the buffers and the activity centers and then calculate the area of the overlap. So everything that's in the lighter pink here would be the Western BRT expansion and the activity center. The North-South BRT is what's in kind of gray here because there isn't an activity center on north side from Azalea to Lombardy. And then the downtown transfer center would be in green. And essentially what you would do with that, I mean, it's just math, but you would take the area in acres for each of those sections or those geographies. You would calculate the overlap from the total activity center area to the specific project area. So for example, the North-South BRT, 36.8% of the activity center area would be covered by the North-South BRT. And then from the model work, you would see the change in activity units from the model years from 2017 out to 2045, which is our current LRTP. And then use the activity units, which are jobs plus people, to calculate the activity units served, and then you would get a total. So that's kind of what the scoring would go, scoring process. I mean, it's a fairly straightforward GIS-based analysis based on the buffer area. I think something that Miles had brought up, if we didn't go with just the activity center proximity, you could also calculate through the buffer area the entire everything that's impacted in terms of people and jobs within the buffer. So you would have the scoring would be more robust for each of these types of projects because of all of the different impacts, whether it's in an activity center or not.
But
I
think if you did the entire buffer, you would not be differentiating between the projects. I mean, it's just, well, I've got a long road, I've got a long route and a longer route, and the longer route always wins. Miles?
Sure. So there's a few pieces to this that, so two things I wanted to highlight from what Chet just shared. This is the process that we have in the LRTP and what we use for like RSTP CMAC right now. But again, we're focusing on activity centers, and we're also focused on the growth of activity centers. So we're only measuring based on the change between future year and base year. So a few things that we could look at if we wanted to go this route but didn't quite love this model would be what Chet said with the TAZs. We could look at just using current year activity units, so not looking at the change, but focusing on how many people and jobs are we serving today if we put this on the ground. The other thing is the more detail we have on the projects, the more refined these become. So if we actually have station locations, which we should, but we don't always have that, depending on when they are. But if we have station locations, then we're doing, half-mile buffers around each station. Like we can get to much more refined versions of this. So I think that's, is it coming in at we're looking for planning money and this is really conceptual, or are we looking at a real project that we're actually ready to build? And I don't know if there's the need for more nuance in how we're looking at those different varieties of transit projects. I think this time around, all three of the projects were sort of at the same general phase. Nobody had design or NEPA done yet. But we might be at different places for future rounds of transit projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dorona?
Sorry, I thought I put my hand down because I had it up for the central business district versus the blob. But yeah, I agree with, I think the blob would make it harder to differentiate or rate the projects in that category, potentially. So talking about the buffer that show the activity center and like how much the route would impact, showing the measurement for us to use to, I guess, pick which project is number 1, 2, and 3. or 4, 5, and 6, whatever.
Mhm.
Just agreeing with the approach.
Yeah, okay, so I'm glad, I really appreciate that Chet and Miles put this together for us pretty quickly, and I think it is a good way for us to evaluate the projects that are in the transit category by adding the activities center measure. Chess and I, we could look at how to revise the framework to include that so that when we meet in November, we've got more information for consideration by the entire group. But this at least gives you all something to look at and consider and chew on a little bit before we get back together in November. Does anyone have more comments on the proposal? Do you see anything that you're concerned about, Todd?
Could you clarify what their proposal is as we are where we are right now?
It's my understanding what Chet showed on the screen, but Miles pointed out a different way to do it, which, right, is to not include the overlap, to just think of all of the jobs and people.
Yeah,
In the
that's why I
buffer?
was confused because
Yeah.
we have two out there right now.
Okay, so I guess we need to figure out which one, or we can discuss that further at our next meeting after we think about it more. Chet?
Yeah, my recommendation, since based on the deallocation discussion, is that we're going to have multiple things to discuss at the next meeting. So I don't think there's any urgency to do this before anything else. I think it would be reasonable to have it all have as part of the package for next meeting.
Not necessarily action on it, but to go through the exercise that Miles proposed, so we could see it kind of side by side, or?
I'm hearing the activity center based scoring is preferable. So I mean, I think it could go either way. There could be a language developed as part of the framework that includes the activity center scoring for transit, and have it up for recommendation at the next meeting. Unless anybody has major issues with that, which we could extend that.
Okay. Chessa?
And can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We'll take a look at it and report back next time, but just keep in mind that we actually have, we have safety, mobility, and accessibility. We have multiple measures. So we'll have to figure out, are we saying this is in addition to some of the other measures, or to replace all the measures, or how it rolls into the, various measures for you.
Yeah, I was thinking it was an additional measure in the transit category. Okay, so let me just make sure we're all on the same track, that the first, that we're going to consider revising the framework to add activity centers as a measure when scoring the transit projects as Chet proposed. If you would rather explore something different along the lines of what Miles was describing, or which is the same as capturing everything in that buffer, right? Instead of focusing on the activity centers. Yeah, okay. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know. But otherwise, we're going to move forward with activity centers. Is everyone good? Okay. All right. So we will have a busy November, and our goal was to have the framework to the CVTA at the end of the year. I feel like it might not be the end of the year. It might be into January. Just I think that the next discussion on PE leveraging, all of that's gonna take a bit of time. And it probably would be better to get all of this ironed out and go to the board once rather than to go back multiple times. Todd?
I'll look to Chet for this, but there wasn't really a full authority meeting scheduled for December anyway, right?
Oh, well, sheesh. I should have
So-
just acted like that was the reason.
Yeah, so punting to January is not really punting to January, right? If you don't make the November, you're in January anyway.
That's right. Yeah, good. We're right on schedule. Chet,
Yeah, that was my comment exactly. So yeah, I think it's the 5th or the 6th is the joint annual meeting, which is moved to December. So we're good.
okay, good.
End of January.
All righty. Let's see, where are we in the agenda? Sorry,
Fall line.
fall line trail long-term management / maintenance. I'll turn it over to Chet.
Thanks. And this is just it's an update. We've started discussing management, overall management, maintenance as a subset of that. But the following work group has started focusing more on detail. And at the last meeting last week, the discussion kind of started taking the form of a to-do list of different things that are necessary to understand what management looks like for something like the fall line, a big regional trail. I think again, the ultimate goal for the TAC, my understanding is that we're not necessarily moving into this with an assumption of duty for the CVTA. CVTA may not be I don't actually believe it's the regional entity that should be overseeing management of a system. I don't think we have that type of capability, to be honest. But I think we are really good at providing advice and recommendations. And I think that if the CVTA ultimately ended up with a guidance manual or a recommendation for to send back out to each of its members, the localities, that would kind of outline what the responsible parties ultimately should be considering, then that would be a really great resource for everyone to have. So to that end, we started working at the work group on collecting a lot of different information, and some of those things include VDOT is going to be providing mileage for what VDOT maintains and the miles that the jurisdictions would maintain, the expectations at least, or the general understanding. There is a General Assembly report from, I believe, 2020 regarding the Capitol Trail and maintenance and sponsorship there. We have some existing MOUs that we're going to be looking at. Thank you to Sharon for providing Henrico's MOU with VDOT. Then we also have a Capitol Trail MOU, which I believe was with VDOT as well. And then we are also seeking, because of the community nature of the Fall Line Work Group, we're also seeking input from regular attendees like sports backers and the Capitol Trail Foundation on responsibilities that should be included in a management arrangement when it gets to that point. So at the last meeting, and Barb, I'll turn it over to you after this, Phil Riggin put together a kind of an overview map of the 43 miles split into segments that kind of include assumptions for who would be responsible for what on the maintenance side. So kind of drilling down from the overall management into a maintenance discussion. And that, would say that Henrico is going to clarify who's responsible for what in regards to crossings on different types of roads, and then that would leave like what VDOT's responsibilities would be. So every jurisdiction is going to have different responsibilities between the locality and VDOT, and we just wanted to be more clear as moving forward in terms of what those splits are going to be. There isn't a one size fits all for each segment in the trail system, so just starting to have a better understanding of what those are. So at this point, I think that the next steps are to continue to collect that information and have at least one more or maybe a few more discussions at the work group level in terms of collecting all that and compiling it into something that's useful. But then that would come back to TAC as something for TAC to take action on and either elevate or continue to work.
Yeah, I feel like once that information is compiled, TAC can review it as an item that's complete. Information has been completed, and it's an available reference document and resource for the jurisdictions and VDOT, any agency or group that's interested in having more conversations about long-term management. Dirona?
Thank you. I just had one question on that. So is this still in coordination with the legislative approach with the state? Are we still going to work to or at least facilitate? So are we just going to have the manual and then each locality meets with, I thought we were talking about tying some of this into like the state trails. We're going to be bringing up like, dedicated funding to plant the seed for maintenance. So while we do see that some don't agree that it should be involved, we clearly think there's some involvement, whether it's leadership or guidance for the maintenance of the trail.
Yeah, so maintenance of the trail is a part of management, long-term management. And we did discuss the thought that, with formation of the State Trails Office and an emphasis on funding regional trails statewide, we could, as a group, consider trying to encourage our elected officials to provide maintenance funding for regional trails through the State Trails Office. It's kind of above my pay grade. But definitely, definitely something that I think makes sense. You can't just build an asset without having a way to maintain it. And right now, I don't think that there's a good way or a good source for that, for maintenance of regional trails. I don't know how Chet maybe you could give me a suggestion about how we might introduce that with the full authority, or, maybe it's a TPO issue as well. I don't know.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a great thing for CVTA to look at because it's focused on funding and alternative sources. So yeah, I'll come up with some recommendations on how to carry that forward.
Mm-hmm. And it might be we need to, as localities, kind of join hands and get our legislative people all together, working together. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, I think that's good on that, unless there are any other questions about fall line trail long-term management and maintenance. All right, next item on the agenda is regional cash flow spend down update. Chet.
Thanks. This is really quick. If you all remember, we did a kind of a deep dive into how everybody expected the regional projects to be for the cash flow to work. And I may have closed that. In the agenda packet is the last version that was done about a year ago, based on input from each of you for the projects that have been committed so far with regional money. Oh, thanks, Barb. And also VDOT was included in that detail. And what we want to do is update this with more current information, more current numbers, and ask for your help in doing that. Okay, so this was not quite a year ago, November of 23. But I think it's probably timely to look at this again and update the information so that it's more current. If you remember, just one of the details for this one, we originally had shown VDOT as another entity, and as you can see on the summary screen here, it's all zeros for VDOT because those projects, even though VDOT was administering them, have been distributed by locality based on where the projects are located. So it shows it's more representative geographically in terms of which projects are in which locations. So we have a category for Powhatan Goochland because 288 was there, and that's a VDOT administered project, but it's shown as Powhatan Goochland. So it distributes that all better. So anyway, that's basically it. We just need to update the numbers, and I could send out the spreadsheet back to everybody with maybe highlighted sections on what needs to be updated for each jurisdiction.
Yeah. And VDOT administered projects, they still provide us with the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Whoever's administering the project needs to figure out the cash flow.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And if I can we set a due date for that?
Sure.
How about because of the holiday schedule and we don't have the December meeting for the authority, can we set a due date from TAC for November 22nd? So the week before Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
That's a Friday, I think. And then that'll give us time to compile everything, bring it back for the December TAC meeting, and then put it on the January authority agenda.
Okay. So the regional cash flow spend down update is due November 22nd.
Yes, please. And we'll send out the worksheet with an updated all the updated dates.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else on that?
Nope,
All right,
thank
we'll
you.
move to item number 11, CVTA TAC member comments. Austin? I don't want to hear your comment.
Yeah. So I don't know how far and widespread the news has gotten, but October 25th, I'm actually leaving the county. So today's my last CVTA TAC meeting, and I will not be able to make tomorrow's our TPO meeting. There's a big development snafu meeting tomorrow happening, so I'll be attending that instead. But I've enjoyed the last 3 years or so working with the group and everything. I think we've made a lot of progress as a region, and I know it'll continue. It's certainly not probably had very little effect on that at all. But I've enjoyed it, but looking forward to my new role with the development community, and I'm sure we'll all cross paths at some point.
Yeah, you've been definitely an asset to the group. Very good comments and feedback as we've been trying to get our feet under us. So we couldn't have done it without you. And I'm so sad that you're leaving us. And I know Goochland's really probably crying.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Wasn't anything that was planned. It's just
Opportunities, right?
sometimes you can't pass something up.
Yeah, Yeah, well, good. Best of luck in your new endeavors. Any other TAC member comments? All right, our next meeting is November 4th. It's going to be busy. You might want to pull that appointment down a little bit, add a little bit of time. We've extended 15 minutes past today's meeting. Adding another 30 minutes might be a good idea on your calendar. And so we're adjourned. Thank you.